Hey everybody, thanks for pressing play, great to see you. So we're here at the site of Berkowitz's arrest, yes. Pine Street, formerly 35 Pine Street, now of course 42 Pine Street. They changed the name of the building, they changed the freaking name of even the number from 35 to 42, all to erase the stain of Disco Dave, who lived here in apartment 7E. Of course, the arrest taking place on August 10th, 1977. So today we're out here to do a couple things. One, to, well, commemorate the arrest. I'm premiering this video on August 10th, 2023, 46 years after the arrest. So we're here basically same time period, almost to the day that it happened, so the tree cover's similar, the weather's similar, and so on and so forth. So anyway, pretty busy street, but I just want to get back to the site. So right here is kind of where we opened up this video and where that picture seemed to have been taken. Somewhere along this fence, it seems like the car was sort of along the corner of the house here. It's a little difficult to tell. But, so we're gonna talk about the arrest, and then we're gonna do a little special treat. We're gonna walk around the neighborhood. For those of you who are new to the channel, we're gonna show you the sights of Son of Sam in the neighborhood of Disco Dave Berkowitz. So of course, why do we call him Disco Dave? Because, well, Disco Dave, who lived here on Pine Street during the arrest, this is where he was arrested that night for the Son of Sam crimes. He was spotted at Peachtree Disco, the same disco that the victim Donna Loria was at the night she was killed. And we had the DJ Tony Amato on, and he talked all about how Dave shook his hand and it was greasy and oily and all that disgusting stuff. But anyway, so it was a parking ticket that led to Disco Dave's arrest. And, you know, it's great to come out here and do these videos now that we have a lot more information about David, about his personality, about the crimes. We're getting some perspective now about the ramping up or the increased frenzy, I should say, of the crimes as they went on. And so some people might say, well, it's crazy, he got a parking ticket, right? Like, that's what led to his arrest. He got this parking ticket in Brooklyn, and why did he continue to do the shooting? He did the shooting 20, 30 minutes after he got that parking ticket. He, by all accounts, should have gotten his car and gone somewhere else or gone home, but he didn't. He stayed put and shot Stacy Moskowitz about 25 minutes later. And the answer to that is because this dude was simply at the end of his frenzy. He wrote to his psychiatrist that he had always planned to get arrested for these crimes. And so we see by the Forest Hills crimes, the shooting of Christine Freund in January 30th, 77, the shooting of Virginia Voskerichian, March 8th, 1977, that he is absolutely freaking out, almost in a pinnacle of frenzy. He's losing it. By this point, he's wigging out in this apartment up here, going absolutely apeshit, waging war against his neighbors in this neighborhood. And we're gonna go down and see the houses that he waged war against, the car house and all that kind of stuff. And it was a culmination of basically years of ramping up his particular brand of mental illness. And with him, it was extreme sociopathic narcissism. He wanted to be known for these crimes. He wanted to be known and famous for what he did. And so getting the parking ticket, well, he probably figured, F it, let's go out in this. And of course, he wanted to go out in a final blaze of glory the night he was arrested. The cops, of course, saw his Ford Galaxy right here, the 1970, according to all accounts, Ford Galaxy. Although personally, the grille pattern, I think it's a 1969, but it's I'm quibbling there on the point. But in either case, the cops come up here. They had realized that he got this parking ticket in Brooklyn. They called up here to Yonkers. Of course, Wheat Car, one of the victims of Son of Sam, answers the phone and says, David Berkowitz, he's harassing my family. And so the cops get very interested. All of a sudden, they start putting two and two together. There's been this crazy letter writer. There's been this dude who's shooting dogs in this neighborhood, setting off Molotov cocktails, sending letters, and all that stuff. And it was really the letter sending that kind of set off all the alarm bells up here in Yonkers. But anyway, so as he was doing Son of Sam, he was waging war in this neighborhood. He was doing all sorts of crazy stuff. We're going to talk about that. But the parking ticket led them here to 35 Pine. They came up during the afternoon, early evening. The arrest was around 10 o'clock. Cops had no clue. There were 7 exits of this building. They had no clue where he lived. Apartment 70 actually turns out on the other side. And, you know, pretty much the story's known. Craig Glassman comes out. He says, I'm being harassed by Berkowitz too. And all that kind of stuff. And so everyone's interested in Berkowitz now. And so the cops stake out this area. So where we're doing it now is we're going to the back of the apartment. Show you up there, show you where Berkowitz's window was. And so the cops stake out. They ask this dude who was parked behind Berkowitz, hey, yo, put your car up to the back of this car so he can't get out quickly. The guy complied. Parties kind of started forming because all the neighborhood started seeing the cops here, and they're like, yo, something's going down, and all that kind of stuff. So quite a party atmosphere. No one really knew it was the Son of Sam. And then around 10 o'clock or so, Berkowitz walks out. He's carrying his freaking 44. He was going out to ostensibly commit a mass shooting in the Hamptons with a machine gun that was in his car. And by then the cops had illegally searched his car, let's be fair, and found the machine gun. And so they were and they found a note in there that was just like the Son of Sam letter. So they were pretty sure they had their guy at this point. This was the guy whose car was ticketed in Brooklyn the night of the, you know, you got to remember it from that perspective. Like, they didn't know this guy. He wasn't yet David Berkowitz, the figure that we know. They weren't even positive for sure he was Son of Sam. He was a suspect. Cops came up here blind. And so, of course, there's the whole issue of, well, did they have a warrant? Was the search illegal? Would he have been let off in a court of law? And personally, my answer to that is no. I think the circumstances, any judge would have been like, yo, in the heat of the battle, the cops had to do what they had to do, and they had to get in this guy's car. It turns out they were right. They saved the city, blah, blah, blah. No one was going to let Berkowitz off on that technicality. Turns out he pleaded guilty anyway. Why? Because he was guilty, he had a guilty conscience, he wanted to go to jail and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, here's the back of his building. This is where Berkowitz lived. And if we look up there at the top floor, that's another thing that pisses me off about this dude. He had a Hudson River view and a top floor, and he still couldn't find peace in this neighborhood. And we'll talk about that. So his apartment is the one up with the fire escape. And of course, I have a bunch of drone footage of this, which I'm showing now. We're showing now the approach to his building, his apartment. And of course, we also have drone footage of us looking out from his view. And we see now that, and we can see the neighborhood that he was really, as I say ad nauseum in this video, that he was waging war against, because he really was. He was harassing, threatening, shooting, Molotov cocktailing, arsoning, calling, sending letters. I mean, this guy was a real public nuisance menace. So yeah, so that was the neighborhood. And so we're gonna actually go down to that neighborhood and go see it firsthand. And plus, doing this for my friend Wheat Car, because they're rezoning her area. And wow, beautiful sky today. Let's see if the camera can pick it up. Gorgeous, oh. Beautiful hue of blue up there. Anyway, Berkey's building. So we're gonna walk down now into the into his neighborhood, the one that he lorded over. And we're gonna talk now about really how this neighborhood was the culmination neighborhood of really 2 years of building mental illness, absolute psychopathy, leading up into the Son of Sam crimes. And then all the Son of Sam crimes happened when he lived in Yonkers here. So real quick again, this is the house in which he was arrested in front of. Just for a perspective of the car spot to his building. His car would have kind of been like, back of the car would have been somewhere around here. Around there, you know, roughly around there. So of course his front entrance was there. And of course, Sam, you know, this Berkowitz, Disco Dave, as we call him, when they put the gun up to his head, you got me, what took you so long, and all that kind of stuff. I mean, who knows what's really true at this point. But anyway, let's talk a little bit about, so Berkowitz ended up here, of all places, of all places in the world, he ended up in this neighborhood here. And of course, you can see that this area is really actually rather majestic looking. I know that's maybe sounds crazy, but I mean, beautiful view of the Hudson, beautiful old architecture. Of course, it's seen better days by now. But now we're walking down Glenwood, major hill. I mean, I don't know if it's really visible seeing it here, but major hill. So Berkowitz comes back from the army, right? All his friends have moved on without him. He's already had sent them like tons of letters from the army, signed Master of Reality, we need to shoot people in the head, drawing pictures of shooting people in the head, US government is evil. You know, the classic signs of some dude deteriorating in some mental illness. Comes back and he's quite frankly off. He's not doing too well. His friends don't want much to do with him. And so it creates this spiral. Here's a spot that, old school heads will remember. This is where I filmed like my third video, right over here. And then, of course, in those years, we were doing we were cult heads back then. We believed that Berkowitz was a member of a satanic cult, and we were walking these streets looking for proof of cult activity. Of course, finding none. Why? Because again, Berkowitz didn't need help. He was decompensating all these years until finally the culmination was Son of Sam, and we need to add the crimes that happened on Wicker Street and the aqueduct. And of course, we're on Grove now, walking down towards Wicker. So we're gonna do some walk and talks at his other locations, Soundview, Co-op City, Barnes Avenue. But really, it's Barnes Avenue where he kind of starts going nuts, right? This apartment in the Bronx, his letters talking about barking dogs speaking to him, and it's kind of echoes of like this delusional stuff that he later claimed was responsible in Son of Sam. And So this dude's shooting dogs. He shoots the dogs next door on Barnes Avenue, and the noise is driving him crazy. I mean, clearly decompensating, and then he moves up to New Rochelle. And long story short, basically the same thing happens. He gets up there's some barking dogs, he goes nuts, starts losing it, getting all belligerent and violent, potentially violent with the owner of the house, has fights with the son and the father. And so he abruptly leaves, and he ends up here in this neighborhood. Now we have the, unfortunately, the tree cover, but his building now is up there. We already have walked down the hill. And of course, the car house is barely visible through these trees here. Don't worry, guys, we'll see it. I mean, you know, old school heads of my video series have seen this a million times. I mean, we basically lived on Wicker Street in this neighborhood for quite a while. But a lot of new people are watching. And, you know, I'm kind of looking at this video as like a little clearinghouse of information. We're gonna get more detailed in other walk and talks and so on and so forth. So he ends up in Yonkers, beautiful area, said he wanted to be at peace. He moves in here, and within, like, I don't know, probably a day or two, he starts hearing the dog barking at 316 Warburton, which is right over here. And he starts hearing the dogs here at Wicker Street, 18 Wicker Street here and 22 over here. And both of those play a much bigger role in the Son of Sam story than anyone ever really talked about until we came along. Because the Neto family were really the OGs. I mean, he was doing stuff to them before he started shooting people in Son of Sam. So of course, here we are on Wicker and Grove. So I was talking about zoning of 316 Warburton. We'll get to it. So yeah, so for We Car out there, they're rezoning your old hood, and your house is basically going to get torn down and turned into apartments. So we're trying to get the last footage of it for posterity. I mean, it's a historic house in true crime history, as of course 18 and 22 Wicker Street. So we're going to show those too. So he moves to this neighborhood, and of course he really starts freaking out. He thinks he's finally going to get peace. He hears this dog over here. Admittedly, the dog barks. Admittedly, over here the dog was barking. Of course, this guy couldn't handle it, and he just completely lost it once he moved to Yonkers. Now, these dark, mystical spots here, the aqueduct trail that we're looking at here that leads up a mile north to the eerie Untermeyer Park. Does this play any role? Are there satanic cults involved? Well, as far as satanic cults involved, the only cults that really existed were the ones in Berkowitz's head. I mean, he was talking about the car gang of 316 Warburton over here. He's talking about the Wicker Street cult over here at 18 Wicker Street that consisted of really the only people he could find in the phone book, as well as the people who lived at 316. The only ones he named were the ones he could find in the phone book. He got John Carr's name wrong. He called him Wheat Car. I mean, the whole thing was a disjointed mess. This dude was basically wigging out, going crazy in his apartment, and in order to satisfy his urges, he actually had to just go out and start killing people. I mean, that was his whole deal. So anyway, there's a kind of a fun little deer here. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna walk, well, let's get as close to this deer as possible, and let's turn this into a nature video. Hey, deer. I'm walking backwards. All right, anyway, so let's show you Wicker Street. Anyway, this is the aqueduct. They found dead dogs here. If you're interested, we did a show on the dead dogs of the aqueduct trail and all that kind of stuff. If you walk far enough, you get up to Untermeyer Park, which of course had nothing to do with Son of Sam. That whole thing was one big mess by Maury Terry. He saw some satanic graffiti written maybe in the late 70s, early 80s by teenagers, And he claimed that that was proof there was a cult there involved with Son of Sam. There was definitely weird shit going on in Untermeyer, no doubt. There were satanic cults, there were heavy metal heads, there were deadheads, there were hippies, there were drug addicts, meth heads, heroin addicts, weed smokers. And of course, one of those subgroups was certain factions of weird dudes who met to sacrifice animals. I think it's the stupidest shit in the world. I would never do it. I have absolutely no interest whatsoever in this kind of behavior. But for some reason, people saw fit to do it. But they weren't hanging out with Berkowitz, who was a mile and a half or a mile down the road, wigging out over here about his neighbors over here. I mean, let's take a look at his neighbors. So on Wicker Street, he was obsessed and going crazy with 18 and 22 Wicker Street. He called 22 Wicker Street the Horror Hotel. This was the Horror Hotel right here. This is where the souls of the dead people that he killed came and were raped, and also they were raped over here in the attic and the basement and all this kind of stuff. And he would write letters to these people to that effect, that the souls of the dead are raped over here and taken to the basement and raped and all this kind of stuff. He was complaining about the dogs here, which weirdly enough, the dog here was named Duke. And of course, in the Breslin letter, we have Duke of Death, and the dog here, they're both German Shepherds, was named King. And of course, we had wicked King Wicker in the Breslin letter as well. And he was talking about the wicked Wicker dog in his crazy apartment letters. I mean, in that apartment building, which unfortunately we can't see now, I'll just throw you a little bit of drone footage right now to see, kind of in the same spot where we're standing, looking at the building from above. The dude was wigging out. This is going absolutely apeshit. So anyway, so he was naming the dogs here. He somehow knew the name of the dogs. He was very inquisitive. He was very good about getting information. Anyway, the first violent, really antisocial violent act that he did was before the Son of Sam. Well, this is debatable, right? But in terms of the neighborhood crimes, in May of '76, before he shot Donna Lauria, he sent a Molotov cocktail up to this here. So he was actually obsessing over these people at the same time he was obsessing over the cars. It's just that the Nettos never got the same publicity because he didn't call himself like Son of Joaquin or Son of King. He called himself Son of Sam about Sam Carr over here. Anyhow, so then he proceeds to shoot Donna Lauria the next month, and or 2 months later. And of course, then during the Son of Sam crimes, he was still sending letters here. He ended up shooting these people's dogs on Christmas Eve, 1976. He was sending Molotov cocktails and shooting the dog over here at 316 Warburton, and generally making a big friggin' nuisance of himself. Of course, calling attention to himself. This dude loved attention. I mean, this guy, we call him the Lord of Life. He loved to string everyone along. And of course, that's what he did to Maury Terry. He found some guy who he thought was a pest, an idiot, so stupid he would freeze to death. I mean, this is all in his letters to his friends, viciously making fun of Maury Terry before he started to troll him. Because Berkowitz at the same time wanted to find someone to use in order to put out to the world that he wasn't completely guilty, that anyone can do what he did if the circumstances were right. And that was kind of his motivation. And in that, he found a weird hybrid in Maury. He was able to absolve some of his guilt. And at the same time, feed his need and his penchant for loving trolling people and manipulating people. And he's still doing it to this day. There are people, just like so-called Christians out there. And Berkowitz is a so-called Christian. Because he still won't tell the truth fully about what happened in Son of Sam, right? So he's not really a Christian. He hasn't given full testimony or whatever that stuff. I'm not a Christian. I respect it. I don't know anything about it really, but my attitude is if you're a Christian, you tell the full truth. Anyway, there's all these Christians now that he's fooling. Oh yeah, I'm into God, and all this. It's the same sociopathic manipulation. He's still into it. So at various points in his life, he found dupes. He tried to dupe people. Some people fell for it, like Maury Terry. Some people didn't, like Klausner, Abramson, and me. So anyway, this is sad because we're witnessing with this sign, which is actually almost a year old now. I knew about this last year, but I haven't really had a reason to come up here. So this spells the demise of the car house, which of course is here at 316 Warburton, and the property next door, which this is former staircase leading up to it. There used to be a really nice house here. It's long since been torn down and turned into gardens. But this is the famous car house. No, not where accomplices lived. This is where the car family lived, people who were victims of Son of Sam. He shot their dog and killed their dog and all that kind of stuff. And so this is the neighborhood where kind of Berkowitz was living, breathing, doing his thing. Beautiful neighborhood of old houses, beautiful old architecture, wonderful views of the Hudson. Yes, run down and shabby, but at the same time, in my opinion, very beautiful. So anyway, trying to think if we missed anything. No, we basically covered what I wanted to do. We talked about the arrests, and I kind of wanted to put something out there for the anniversary. Of course, most people will see this after the anniversary, but that doesn't matter. We were able to premiere it on the same night that he got arrested 46 years later, and to me, that's a fun thing to do. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and let me think if there's anything before we go. Well, of course, I want to get into the right position here for our final shot. Yeah, and we spoke about his waging war here, and we didn't get too deep into any particulars, which is probably best. We have a million videos. If you guys are interested, you could watch me debunking Maury Terry, me talking to victims, me talking to friends of Berkowitz in his childhood, all that kind of fun stuff. Us talking to people from Untermeyer Park, and so it's all there for you, and we really hope that you guys go on this journey that really is kind of fun in true crime, the Son of Sam case. It's a lot of twists and turns, but in the end, it really all came down to, well, this right here. Berkey wigging out over the cars, the Lord of Life, and the neighborhood he reigned over.